Well, what a session that is at the ongoing national conference. The committee levels, that's where they are now. We're joined now by Liborous Oshomah, who is a legal practitioner, to look at some of these contentious matters as you see yourself there. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you, my pleasure.
But that was a heated session, and so you could imagine if our cameras had missed all of this, then they would have had this deep-seated animosity, perhaps between those 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of them who were almost at each other's throats. But as it is now, the contention has got to do with what they were discussing.
Yes,
devolution of power and that
item 39 on the exclusive legislative list. That's talking about mineral resources and all of that, natural resources. Yes, it shows the passion, the passion Nigerians have about government and governance. Even if you listen to the words coming out from the mouth of this other man, I've forgotten his name now, it shows that truly a lot of people are very passionate about this country. And so we should do everything possible to make it work. For me, really, we cannot, there's no way we can move forward in Nigeria without talking about restructuring. And restructuring really, you know, some people have called it practice through federalism. Some had said, look, there's nothing like true federalism. It's either it's federalism or it's not federalism. There's no true Chamberlain or fake Chamberlain. If you're practicing federalism, practice it the way it is practiced world over. What we're actually practicing, it's not a federal structure.
But what does our law say we're practicing?
The law says federalism. But if you look at the exclusive legislative list that they are deliberating on now, you cannot have a federal structure and yet you have about 68 items on the exclusive lists and then about 30 on the concurrent list. And so that means if you altogether 68 plus 30, that's about 98 items that the federal government can legislate on. Because the concurrent list, the federal government and the state government can legislate on it. And if there is a conflict on any laws made by both parties, that made by the federal government will supersede the one made by the state government. And so, if you, and yet you say you are practicing a federal structure and you have 98 items that the federal government can legislate on, can take precedent on. And so it simply means that every other person will always, like we have now, you have a situation where everybody rushes to Abuja, you know, for meal ticket. And so if we truly want to move forward, what we should be looking at is how do we ensure that truly we practice federalism. And so we need to restructure, you know, the system. And by so doing, we need to look at the ground norm, the constitution, and say, how do we work this and ensure that power comes from the grassroots to the top and not from top to bottom.
You know, the arguments of those who push for and against notwithstanding in terms of our federal structure and the concurrent or exclusive list, but what about the exclusive legislative list, for instance, or the concurrent list? Have they shown themselves to the extent that they can tell us, look, we've done what we can. We've legislated so much on the exclusive legislative list, but we've got shortfall. We've done what we can on the concurrent list to the extent that now, in order to improve society a little further, you need to do something about that exclusive legislative list. So some of these areas have not even been sufficiently touched.
No, that's where we are, because that item 39, that's, you know, it's like the foundation, because the source of the revenue flows from that item 39.
So this is about revenue?
Yes, it's about revenue, because you cannot ask me to provide pay salaries, provide infrastructures, and at the same time, the bulk of the revenue from my state, including taxes, you know, comes from the center. And so the center mops up everything here, and then you call every other person together and share. It's like, it encourages laziness. It's like having 10 children, and then you have 3 that are very hardworking, and then you have 7 that are just there, and you have another 3 that are just there, and then 4 that are lazy. And then you say, okay, what we do, let us, you know, for the sake of peaceful coexistence, let's everybody, no matter your earnings, at the end of the month, you give your earnings to daddy, who is at the center, and he will in turn share equally amongst the children. And so, if the man that is not working at all is the first son, he would naturally get, a larger portion than the man who is working for that resources. And so the man who is working for the resources will tell you, why do I need to work? I would just rather sit down and let other people work and share for me too. And that's why you have people, anytime there is a census, you see there is so much agitation. People want to, increase figures. And then when there's voters registration, you now begin to ask yourself, why is it that this voters registration, and then the actual voting, why don't the figure tally with the figures, at the census? It's all about revenue sharing. But if the revenue comes from, where it is generated, and then you should be able to say, okay, if, for example, in your local government, whatever you generate in your local government, what you just need to do is to pay a percentage to the state, and then the state in turn to the center to at least assist those other areas that are not fully developed or that are weak. It will be easy for you to hold your councillors and local government chairmen accountable because they are closer to you. You don't need to travel to Abuja to begin to look for somebody who is representing you. That's why you hear some people say, the moment we elected our senators and our House of Rep members, we no longer see them. They've gone to Abuja now, and then they've been separated from us. So we should learn to restructure and stand government on its head, on its legs, not on its head, because what you have now was standing governance on its head. That's why the economy will not move beyond this, everybody going to collect something. And so at the time, when you, like to address your question fully, when you now collect, what happens is, the man tells you the one I collected was not even enough to pay salaries. So we had to mop up the little we could get within the state. Take Lagos State, for example. In Zamfara, alcohol consumption is illegal. But yet, the VAT collected from alcohol consumption in Lagos is shared to Zamfara states as a revenue sharing. You talk about mineral resources in some states, and then yet, these people cannot boast of good potable water. And yet you have mineral resources in some other states, and the people, because money will always come from the center, so it is convenient for them to sit down and wait for the one that will come from the center without looking for how to develop the mineral resources in their state. Universities in this country were built with funds from cocoa, but we no longer talk about farming these days, apart from a few states that are talking about the state beyond oil. And so we need to really look at this issue and address it. Otherwise, we'll just be going around in circles.
It is that going around in circles. Chairman asked the question. The issues that are coming forth now at the national conference, have they been handled at any point in time, even minutely, to even begin to be brought forth?
They've always been. If you remember, in the First Republic, we had, even when we were practicing a parliamentary system of government, we had the native authorities. Every region had control of its resources. You remember, we had the Ibadan native authorities, you had Lagos City councils, and they were in charge of the authorities. They had their own police. Now we're even talking of the fact that we are not ripe for state police, something we practiced in the 60s. And in year 2014, we are telling ourselves we are not ripe for it. These issues, until the military came and said, look, for peaceful coexistence, let us, harness these resources. Even secondary schools, where for the purpose of unity, you need to have unity schools, you need to have federal government schools and the rest. And so gradually, even universities owned by regions were taken over by federal government. And so until the Second Republic, where the state government started establishing universities. And so when you look at it from that position, these issues, even at the Babangida conference, these same issues reared its head. The issue of the resource control and practice of federalism was the cross of the entire debate at that conference. So if you let me, at the end of the day, the issue could not be resolved because a certain some people from some part of the country, the Northerners, walked out because the people from the South were asking for 100% resource control. And at the end of the day, it was the 13% arrived at that Obasanjo eventually implemented when he came to power. So it had always been an issue. We need to control our resources. We need to control our resources. We need to practice, fiscal federalism.
If these men, most of whom are in the National Conference, were there when this was being practiced,
yes.
So why are they finding it difficult to agree to the fact that we should return to, in quote?
You see the problem. First and foremost, some people had said that even when you talk about restructuring Nigeria and a national confab, it is not the politicians and the trade unionists that would restructure Nigeria, because Nigeria is an entity made up of indigenes of nationalities of different origin. And so for them to coexist peacefully, they say when two individuals, according to Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, he said when two incompatible mates, the only way they can coexist peacefully is to agree on certain issues and agree on others. And so we are saying Nigeria is a marriage of strange bedfellows. The colonial masters just came and mapped out area and said, look, whether you like it or not, you must coexist. And if there is a basis for us to renegotiate that coexistence, it should be the ethnic nationalities that should sit down and say, let us negotiate our coexistence, and not some trade unionists or some politicians who had been the problems right from day one. And so what you see play out here is a clash of interest. It's a clash of personality. People are agitating, they're struggling to remain relevant. And so the only way they can be relevant is to keep the structures as it is. And that's why you see all of these clashes. It's not about the people, it's not about a better Nigeria. It's how do we perpetually keep these people in check? How do we ensure that we sit down in the comfort of our home or sit down in the confines of our environment and continually dictate how revenues should be shared and how revenue should be made and what comes to the people? So whether we like it or not, without working, we should be able to make something. That's what you see playing out.
No.